software delivery community talk. This one is myself and Tim. We are both involved in external things, mentoring, ambassadory things. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk to you all about it. There's been a decent drive at Opencast for things like STEM ambassadors, but this is slightly different. So if you are the type of person that would like to get involved with something externally, but think that actually doing it within a school setting is really not for you, these things might take your fancy, or might, spin off some other ideas for you. So Tim, we'll start with you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you're working with, and how you got into that and how long you've been doing that for?
Yes, so I'm mentoring with a bootcamp called School of Code. Initially, they were based out of the West Midlands, but ever since sometime in about 2020, for multiple reasons, they've been online only. Can't imagine why. So I get involved with that, and I discovered them through some networking events in Birmingham. And then I've been sort of involved ever since in varying capacities. They tend to run a boot camp every quarter. They'll kick off a new boot camp where they're asking for external mentors to come in, and they also occasionally want talks from external people. So it involves me giving up sort of 30 minutes a week. I give up to online mentor somebody who's starting their journey into tech from an other background. So this time around, I'm mentoring someone who decided to stop being an estate agent because they hated being an estate agent. And, I can see that. I can empathise.
Brilliant.
Sweet. Well, I'll swap it over and turn the exact question on you, Sinéad.
Yes.
You're now an ambassador for Code First Girls. So,
yes.
What does that mean, and how did you even get there?
Yeah, so Code First Girls are an organisation who provide free learning and courses for women and non-binary people to get into tech. We have a Code First Girl in the audience. So Lily has been working with Code First Girls and taking some of their courses as part of her journey into tech. I became aware of them last year because somebody from the social impact side had kind of reached out to say, are we involved with these people at all? Because their name had come up, and that was something that maybe would help us a little bit with bid work. So I had a little look into it and immediately was like, oh, this would have been amazing if I'd have known about this when I switched into tech. So kind of looked into it a bit, attended one of their courses, and I could talk a little bit more about those later. And so when the opportunity for our ambassadors came up, it was kind of like autumn of last year. I thought that would be a really good role because I switched into tech myself. I am very passionate about getting more women into the tech space, and I thought it just felt like a really good fit. So I went through quite an intensive application process for that. But also, as I went through the process, it became very clear that a lot of what they are aiming to do aligns with a lot of what Opencast are trying to do. So a lot of values-based stuff, a lot of people-driven centric things. A lot of DE&I stuff that Opencast is also striving to do. So it just felt like a really good fit, and I was selected as one of, I think it's 48 of us this year, which is great because there was only 20 last year. So there's obviously an increase in people that want to get involved with these things, which is amazing. So far, I have not really done anything as part of this role yet. This is probably the kickoff of me actually doing something for Code First Girls. So that's nice. I can do it internally with Opencast. But so far, I've just done a few bits of training, and then we've got a kickoff in London next Saturday. So I'll be going along to that. And from there, you'll probably be hearing a little bit more about what Code First Girls might be able to do either alongside Opencast or what other women at Opencast have maybe experienced working with Code First Girls. So specifically, I guess, Tim, why did you think this was the right opportunity for you? And why do you continue to feel like it's a good opportunity for you?
Yeah, I wanted to give back to the software space. That was my primary motivation for getting involved in the first place. I came into software from a squiggly career. I've got a degree in geoscience, so my master's dissertation was on volcanoes. And then from there, I got the opportunity after some fandangling of PhDs in admin. I got an opportunity to join a software company that worked on geological software, and they said, hey, we will train you while you're here in object-oriented programming and in Java. So that's how I got my start, and I kind of wanted to give back to other people who wanted to change career and say, look, here's a way in, the rising tide lifts all and all that jazz. So it's mainly come from giving back from my own entry to software, and then I continue doing it because I like what they do. I like their approach to boot camps. It's free for the applicants. They have to be off work for 16 weeks, but they can apply for universal credit, and they'll get a 16-week of training, and then School of Code will be attempting to place them at various placements for their first starter. And basically, the bootcamp makes its money from government grants and from essentially like a recruiter's fee goes to the bootcamp when people are joined. And the course itself is really good. They're always looking to evolve it, and we can get involved that way. Like, I've had conversations with them about the evolving tech stack, and if more of Opencast wanted to come along, we decided to start doing talks there, we could definitely set some direction as well.
Nice.
So why did you get involved in Code First Girls?
It's a lot of the same stuff. So absolutely to give back. Like, I feel like I've been very fortunate, especially in my time at Opencast, to really find like a wonderful community that support my personal development and allow me the space to do things like this. And also Opencast made me feel more optimistic about the tech industry. So where I've worked previously, it's been very difficult to feel like there's a community out there, and kind of I would have maybe been more reluctant to encourage women into tech. I wanted to see more women in because I didn't want to be there by myself, but also I didn't want to bring them into an environment that wasn't going to be a good space for them. But Opencast made me more positive about the outlook for women in tech. And it's also opened my eyes to a lot of the other roles that are available for people in the tech space. So that's the other thing as well, is that Code First Girls do focus mainly on development and on software development journeys, but they also, do a bit of DevOps as well. But they also promote like Scrum Masters, product owners, designers. So they have other routes as well. So if women are looking to get into the tech space, they don't just have to go down the traditional software development role. But also, like I said before, I would have done this if I'd have had the choice, and if I'd have known this was here, or if it was here when I switched into tech. This is the route I would have taken. So when I switched in, I was doing Code Academy at first, which I think probably a lot of people are very familiar with, and it can only take you so far. And I was working at the time. I just got married, so I had worked really hard the previous year to save up and afford my wedding. I just got married and felt that with us having paid for that, we had a relatively small mortgage. We didn't have any children. So I thought now would be a good time, if I was going to step back from work and do something different, that was the right time to do that. So what I chose to do was formalized education. So I went back to university and did a conversion degree to get into computer science. It was very expensive. I struggled to survive for a year without having to constantly ask my husband for a few extra quid for a coffee in the mornings. And when I came out the other side, I didn't necessarily feel prepared to be a career switcher or a women in tech. I kind of just felt ready to do some Java code for a graduate scheme. This program prepares people much better for like what the actual tech landscape looks like, what working in a project's actually going to look like, what challenges you're going to face. You meet other people while you do these courses, so you're more likely to have like some people to speak to when you're having challenges in your new role. So it's kind of learning and also community, and that really spoke to me. So it just felt like a really good time for me to hand back some of the things that I've learned. Yeah. So obviously you were saying as well, Tim, about for you it was about giving back. And how you want to do that. But what do you find specifically is good about it for you? Like, what are the benefits for you in doing something like what you do for School of Code?
Yeah, I'll also try and answer Lily's question here as well. So it's great for me personally because I get to continue mentoring, like that skill set of being able to mentor. It's a great place to learn it in the first place because they have lots of great onboarding tools and a great community to help support you if you go on and like, right, I want to start mentoring there. You're not just like dumped in. Then once you're there, like for me, I get to keep that sharp. I get to see people develop from having no tech to being able to get into the world. And yeah, really for me, it's I can practice some of those various mentoring skills that I'm learning myself and really just actually get that practical experience. That's like what it comes down to. What's good for me, it's half an hour of a week in which is kind of like the personal development that I want to be doing. So there's that massive upside as well. In terms of the biggest challenge that Lily's asked in chat, biggest challenge is when people don't turn up. So I always say to my mentees, that's on you. Like, I'll follow up, I'll check that you're okay. If you're not answering me, then I'll check with School of Code that you're okay. And if the answer is yes, you're fine, but you're choosing not to turn up, then I'm not going to bother chasing you. And you won't get an effective outcome from your journey in the boot camp because it's getting wrong. And then the other hardest part is they ask you to pair on a programming challenge, and you're like, I have never seen React Redux with this framework you've chosen. You're like, oh my god. Or looking at their code, spotting the problem, and then working out how do I lead them to the answer without just giving them the answer. And that is also why it's like I find it really good for me, like that sort of Socratic process of leading someone from I've got no knowledge, and you look at it and go, oh, probably this your code's too complex and this ternary within a ternary is wrong. But how do you lead them to that without just telling them the answer or telling them it's wrong? And that is really useful in consulting as well. If someone's asking you for help, it's better to teach them how to solve it than to just solve it themselves for them.
I totally agree with that. I find, especially with pairing and things like that, it's sometimes the hardest thing to do when you're trying to get somebody to where you think the code needs to go without just going, can you write the code like this? Like nobody's learning from that. Yeah, that's a super, super hard skill to master, I think. So for me, I think that what is good for me is it's growth. So I can't lie, like this is a really good thing for me to be able to put on things like competency progression based feedbacky forms, be like, look at this external thing that I did, aren't I so great? But also I'm going to learn a lot. So coming into Opencast, I had quite a good idea of what the rest of the tech sector felt like to work for. And I've been here for 2 years now, and I sort of sometimes still now forget that everywhere else is not as good and other places are challenging for women in the workplace. They're challenging for parents in the workplace. Their diversity and inclusion initiatives maybe aren't as strong as ours. And so it helps me stay grounded in what the overall challenges are that we're trying to work with. There's a lot of people from different backgrounds coming into these things. So even just the ambassadors, we're looking at lots of different age groups, lots of different career backgrounds. Not all the ambassadors are tech based. So some of them have maybe just finished the Code First Girls degree. Some of them have maybe done like a few small courses but aren't in tech roles. And some of them are like me, who are professional software developers. So there's a good spread of people as well. So it's good to understand the existing challenges facing women and diverse genders as they come into the tech workspace, because it's going to help me continue to make sure that Opencast makes the right decision for those people. There's a question in the chat from Will about, would you ever be interested in running a bootcamp / academy internally within Opencast? So this is a really interesting one for me because initially I was like, yeah, God, I'd love to do that. That'd be amazing. But a couple of things from that is, as Tim kind of alluded to, it's really hard to teach people how to code, and it takes a very special skill set to be able to do that. And it's not maybe something that everybody's cut out to do. But I think with a bit of training, then absolutely, if we wanted to do something like that, we could identify the right people and get them to lead these sorts of things. More and more, and I think at one point Juan was on the call, so I'd be keen if he wanted to dip in and contradict me, feel free. But more and more, I'm finding that it's not really within like the purpose of Opencast to do things like that. Like ultimately, we are consultants, so doing things like boot camps and academies, maybe for people wanting to learn consultancy skills, like absolutely. But teaching people how to be junior or graduate level software developers is probably not somewhere that we're ever really going to, maybe it's not in the short term anyway, like spend our energy and focus. So for example, the degrees that they run at Code First Girls are similar to what Tim was talking about. They link your graduate with a company, and there's a role at the end for you, so you can interview for a role at the end of your degree when you pass, and the idea is that you can then go straight into a workplace. It's not something that Opencast, I think, would be able to partner with, because we aren't looking at the moment, we aren't looking at graduate software developers. We're looking at people that we can place on client and make billable nice and quickly, because we're looking for consultants. We're not looking for just junior developers. Do I think junior developers can make good consultants? Absolutely. And I think Joe Scott Hartley's on this call, and I think he's a really good example of somebody who has developed amazingly as a developer and a consultant. I think it's more that it's doing like an academy via Opencast is maybe not the right approach, but I'm only one voice across the community. So if people feel differently to that, I'm always keen to try these things.
Jumping on that question, I think some of it comes down to, so if we were discussing before this about diversity and inclusivity and getting more diverse people into tech, and again, that's kind of why I'm involved with School of Code. They make sure they have a very diverse base, and they certainly when I first got involved and it was just West Midlands based, they were like, our diversity and metrics for a given bootcamp must match the pie chart for the West Midlands. And that was a really strong, bold statement that they made. And it involved some positive discrimination, but they were like, no, if we want to live by our values of getting more diverse people into tech, we have to do that. So I think for Opencast, I mean, short, yes, I'd love to run something. Right now, Sinead's right, I don't think we have the capability, and I don't think we should ever look to run a you have no knowledge in software, you now have knowledge in software course. But I do think we could run something like a conversion course, or a finishing school was sort of how I pitched it to School of Code once. The concept that you are you have some programming knowledge in your background. You might have exited School of Code, you might have done whatever, and it's that like finishing bit that gets you from I'm a hobbyist developer to I am a capable software developer for a company, or in our case, I'm a consultant. So you'd be lucky at training. It's like, okay, let's ensure that you probably got solid TDD anyway, so that's great. So let's really hammer down the agile working practices we want to see, the consultancy soft skills that we want. And then, okay, maybe you've come out of a university degree, then we might want to give you some practical software development, because you've probably been doing quite a lot of high-level database optimizations, which will be great for us. But we're like, okay, well, we actually need you to write some code in a team. And then your career changes might be like, okay, there are some of these things which are missing, and just like filling in the gaps, but not aiming to do a full whole thing. But yeah, I don't think that's a short-term thing.
Yeah, agreed. And actually talking about diversity and stuff as well, that's what I really like about Code First Girls is there's a lot of racial diversity across both the ambassadors and also the participants with Code First Girls, and also social mobility as well. So the courses are all free, which is amazing. So the idea is that anyone can get into tech through these courses. Also, speaking about diversity related stuff, Tim, I kind of like gave you this question because I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with the question that I was going to ask. So thinking this week, I'm talking about Code First Girls. We've also had the Girls Network in speaking earlier this week, and both Girls Network and Code First Girls are open to non-binary people. And my question really, Tim, for you was, how do you, as a non-binary person, especially as a masculine presenting non-binary person, feel about being included in women in tech stuff, or, girl related stuff that is like, well, we welcome non-binary people. Do you feel welcome? Do you feel like there is a place for you there? Or do you feel like it erases who you are by putting you in with the women?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. I personally feel something's difficult about stepping into that space because I've gained a lot of privilege from what I looked like and before I transitioned. So that's something on myself. And without being brutal to Code First Girls, it says Code First Girls. The intent is to get women into tech, and I'm like, yes, I want to support you doing that, but if that's your headline aim, then it's women into tech and non-binary people as an afterthought. But that being said, I also play for, I play roller derby for women's flat track roller derby and men's roller derby, and you can't get away from gendered names out there in the space. So I can see it. I considered responding to Roz's comment about International Women's Day and what we could do about that. And again, it's like, is this I question myself, is this a space that a non-binary input is wanted, because it's branded in such a way? It gives me that pause for thought, and I don't know whether it would give other people out there in the world pause for thought. And if you saw Code First Girls, you'd be like, well, I'm not even going to go past the first page because I'm not a girl. I'm not a man either, but you know what I mean? It's like, on the one hand, yes, branding and names shouldn't mean as much as they do, but on the other, they also do carry a lot of baggage, and we have to accept that. And it's where each person can make their own judgment call.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been involved now with 3 organizations that have the word girl in their title. And that's always been my first challenge, is where do you sit with non-binary people? Well, actually, my first challenge is also, what do you mean by girl? Are we talking about trans women as well? And thankfully, all the ones I've been involved with have been absolutely trans women, absolutely are welcome here. But definitely, I do ask that question of, where do non-binary people fit here? And the response I get is absolutely, non-binary people are welcome here. But then, you've mentioned there about the privilege that you carry, or even how people will perceive you, how does that impact what they are trying to offer and what they are trying to do? So for me, I think moving forward, what would be really good are organizations that either highlight a focus on women and diverse genders, or ones that specifically target diverse genders. So they are putting non-binary people at the forefront, because that for me as well, it's about making sure that you have your own curated space if that's what people want and need. So moving on a little bit from that, if there's any more questions that people want to ask in the chat, we've got a big long one from Dan. I'm lucky enough to have always known that computers were what I wanted to spend my professional life, and also to have had that happen. Is there anything beyond the standard be kind, be supportive, be humble that applies to everyone, that people like me who didn't switch into tech should do to support and encourage switches? So I'll take that one first, and then Tim, it would be great to hear from you as well. So be kind, be supportive, be humble. That's basically the headlines for me. I've never had a bad interaction with somebody that's just trying to be kind and just trying to be supportive. If you're trying to include that person and you're trying to encourage them, I think that's basically the bare bones of it. As somebody that switched out of a non-tech role, the people that really put me off the most were the ones that were very keen to let me know how much they knew. Because what they don't realize is that they're then opening up a whole world of things that I didn't know. So support where you can, acknowledge the privilege of the knowledge that you have, and just kind of I always try and get people to remember what it was like when you were a junior. Even if you've been doing tech for 20 years, what was it like in that first year? What's it like even now when you're asked to learn a new language? It's really stressful, it's really difficult. So always just try and hold on to what it feels like to be a junior sometimes when you're working with somebody that is struggling with something and you feel like you've told them multiple times what they need to do and it just isn't quite clicking for them. Like, try and think about like where they are in their career and what their experience looks like at the moment. Before I hand over to Tim on this one, what I will also say as well is that remember that career switches are often grown-ups that have had jobs before. So that was my experience coming into tech, is that I was treated like a brand new grad that had never been on a call with a client before, when actually I'd been on like midnight calls with clients in the States relating to huge multi-million-pound manufacture batches in my research science role. So I could do the client bit and I could do the project management bit and I could do the being professional on calls bit. I just couldn't do the code. That was the bit I couldn't do. So always try and remember that just because you're new to code doesn't mean that you're new to the world. Tim?
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with that. And I think, be kind, be supportive. I always taught, you're not going to get your mentoring right the first time round, and that's okay, because it's an agile learning person for you. And for me nowadays, what I encourage them is that tech is always learning. We're always learning. So I say, don't focus on absolutely mastering Node.js as an example. I say, learn on mastering the parts of the toolkit. You understand when to use a for loop. You'll understand when to filter on an array, when to use these things in your toolbox to make good code. Then when you come to learn a new language, you Google, how do I use for loop in language name? So I've got that grounding that's away. But I think, Sinead, you've covered everything I would want to say there.
Brilliant. For me, I think in terms of downsides, so far, I'm not sure. I've not been with them for long. It's hard to tell, 6 weeks in officially to me working with them. What I will say, though, is an anticipated downside is going to be the amount of time that I need to take doing these things. So I applied to be an ambassador for Code First Girls when I was on a very secure, comfortable DWP project with lots of lovely Opencast people. And then I got moved on to another project, which was a really challenging onboarding experience, and was completely different and has challenged me a lot. And I'm probably only now getting comfortable with that team and with that project, and getting comfortable with not knowing stuff about all of the project. This is a year-long commitment, and as consultants, we all know that our projects may not last for a full year. So I don't know what my Opencast consultancy landscape is going to look like over the next 12 months. So the downside to me is that in the job that we do, committing to it as something that's going to take time out of your day or your evening or whatever for a full year when you don't know what the ebb and flow of client work is going to be is quite challenging. I know that there will be a need for me to do things outside of hours. So all of the training that I've done so far has been 6:30 in the evening. 6:30 in the evening's bedtime for my kids. So I'm having to miss the occasional one to do these training courses, which is fine. But also something that somebody raised in general just about Code First Girls is that when you do their courses, they are 6:30 till 8. So it is live teaching, but it's 6:30 till 8. And that can be quite challenging for parents because that's peak bedtime or peak, oh my God, I need to sit down and decompress a little bit. So I'd say that's the downside for me at the moment, is not knowing how big a commitment potentially I've taken on, and not knowing what is coming up for me client-wise, and therefore how those two things are going to work together. Just to pick up a question from the chat, Famsi was asking, any challenges faced at Client Space in the last 2 years, and how did I overcome those? So for me, the challenge was a lack of confidence. So as a career switcher, I had worked in a tech company when I finished uni. I came out, went into a tech company, worked there for 5 years, and worked in a proprietary language. So I did not have any professional modern language experience. So when I came to Opencast and I was immediately put on a Java project, the imposter syndrome was incredibly intense, and I really struggled with that for a long time, and it's probably only in the last 6 to 8 months that I'm more comfortable with the fact that I know what I'm doing and that I can kind of talk quite well about the things that I'm doing. Specifically from like clients, I've never had any issues. That's not to say that that's the same across the board. I don't speak for all women or all women at Opencast or all women in tech roles, but thankfully, gratefully, I've never experienced any challenges from clients because I am a female developer, which is great. I think it's just hard sometimes to build relationships without maybe sometimes going a bit too soft with people, because you kind of it's constantly fighting against that. I don't want to come across as bossy. So if I want to be assertive with people, it's always a more difficult line, I would say, for me to tread than perhaps it is for other people. But I'm not the only demographic of people that will struggle with that. I think when we had Black History Month last year, there were people talking about the fact that being Black and a woman meant that putting across your opinions, you had to be really careful about how you voiced those, so as to not have people perceive something in you that wasn't there. So thankfully, no, in the last 2 years, I haven't overcome anything specifically related to clients. It's just been general internal imposter syndrome stuff. I got really good coaching with Lauren O'Connor last year. So Louise put me onto that. So there are some people across Opencast who are either coaches or training to be coaches. So if you are interested in anything like that, reach out to Louise, Ellie, or if you're not from our practice, your Peep, and ask them about any opportunities there, because it did wonders for me. We went in January of last year, and I said that my confidence was a 3 out of 10. Which for some people might be quite surprising, because I come across as somebody that like knows what they're talking about. But at the beginning of last year, was absolutely convinced that I didn't know what I was doing with any of the things. And that is definitely because of it's the nature of career switching. You constantly feel like you are behind. So, but we came out of that coaching, and I felt I was kind of like a 7 or 8 out of 10. That's partly because of the coaching, partly because of the team that I was on and the technical leadership that I was working with. So, yeah. I'd say that's the biggest challenge, I think, as a career switcher, is confidence. And that's why I think it's also so important, like Dan was saying, to keep it kind and keep it supportive when you're working with career switchers. So Joe's got a question. Tim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So Joe asked, how proactive do you find you as a mentor? Because I talked earlier about being a challenge and having to put onus on the students. So I thankfully have never had a problem where a student hasn't come for mentoring, or if they've missed a time, it's been because they're ill or something's come up, and it's been a fine discussion to have. Like, I'm never mad. I've asked people to provide me a CV in advance, and they've gone, I'm sorry, I haven't provided it in advance, but actually it's because I want to run through it in the meeting. So it's setting reasonable expectations and having reasonable expectations. So on School of Code, they're in 9 to 5 solid, and then they'll want to be doing their catch-ups and relearning some of the things into the evening. So I'm aware that during the 16-week, they're intense on, and actually sometimes I want to be a bit hands-off and be like, okay, we've not got this done. What have you done? Are you actually taking time for yourself as well? But yeah, so some of my students, I just message them in Slack on a week and be like, what day is good for you? Or they message me and be like, hey, can we do this day? And some of them, we've just had a recurring weekly reminder on agreed Tuesdays, 4 p.m. We're doing the thing. And that's helped keep us honest with each other. And again, that depends on how they want to set it up. If they want to show me some code, sometimes I'll be on a call and be like, okay, I've been told that it's time for you to do a demo for me. So please do a demo for me. But most of the time I leave the content up to them. Ideally, they'll message me in advance to be like, I want to talk about things. I've got some time to think about it and prep, especially if it's like I'm having problems with JUnit or Jest. Can you give me some hands and be like, okay, let's get my head in the Jest mindset.
Nice. I think what we'll do is we'll move on to like our last little question that we'd prepared ahead of time. But the final thing we were going to cover is long-term goals. So Tim, long-term goals.
Midterm goal, I want more people from Opencast to be generally involved in mentoring in the bootcamp space. I think it's a really good consultancy skill to pick up, and it'll be good for you personally. And ideally, I want to have an Opencast takeover day at School of Code. Like, I think we could do some really cool stuff. We said, we're going to come in for a day, we're going to teach you like one specific thing. So I've been there when they've had The Economist in, and they've done a day on AWS DevOps. So, a day where we come in and we're going to teach a day's worth of curriculum, because again, that's just a really nice thing to give back. It's something that doesn't cost a huge amount, but gets our name out there. And then long term, I would love us to be in a place to be able to take career switchers and graduates in and have a pipeline to skill them up to be junior consultants, and then start getting them onto projects.
I think mine's the same. So very similar. It would be lovely in the future to be able to be one of the partner companies with Code First Girls, and have that knowledge that we've got people coming in that are really dedicated, because if they've spent their evenings and weekends learning how to code, they're probably the types of people that we want here. If Code First Girls think they're a good value fit, they're likely to be a good value fit for Opencast. So yeah, that would be nice, really long term, is to be able to link Opencast up directly with Code First Girls as a sponsor. And I think midterm, I think for this year, for me, it's about raising the profile of Code First Girls with the likes of you all and Opencast in general. My plan is to do, we're going to do a couple more of these as the year go on. So me and Tim have talked about maybe having another check-in midway through the year and kind of talking to you all about the sorts of things we've been up to specifically this year, and then having a wrap up at the end of the year where we can talk about everything we've done for the year and what we've learned and everything like that. But also what I'd like to do is a session for myself, Lily, Lynn Steinberg as well has been involved with Code First Girls. Anyone that's had experience with Code First Girls that works for Opencast, and do a fireside chat with them. And then if we get road shows or any kind of more collaborative, community-based in-person events going, involve Code First Girls in that, and give some of the students an opportunity to see what consultancy looks like. Because I think obviously the track focuses on just being an in-house software developer, but consultancy is a slightly different skill. So it's kind of opening their eyes to the possibilities of consultancy as well.
Yeah. Similarly, I think we've got roadshows, we've got a V Hub, is it, in Birmingham? We've got that space, so we could find a space and host an event. So they hosted a graduation event over in Alpha Tower this year. Could be involved in that. When the next bootcamp intake is, a couple of weeks away, and they're starting to think about mentors, getting Chris in to come and have a conversation with you all about the specifics of what School of Code mentoring looks like, because he's a really good speaker, and I also want to get him involved because he's got a PhD in AI and databases. So I'm sure we could ask him lots of questions, not just about School of Code.
That's great. For me, I think as well with Code First Girls, it's interesting because I think we're both keen to get Opencast involved, but in slightly different ways. So obviously you're keen to get Opencast involved as mentors, and I'm keen to get Code First Girls in as a service for people at Opencast. So there are plenty of people across core function and across other practices that are keen to upskill themselves in coding, or are interested in switching, or just kind of want to have a better understanding of what some of the technical side of the business is doing. So kind of being able to promote some of the courses and some of the really short learning opportunities that they have to people internally at Opencast, so that they can make use of them.